Smart English Podcast.
Let's talk about everything.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Smart English Podcast, where we practice real and natural English conversations together. And today we are talking about something very relatable for every English learner, which is common speaking mistakes that sometimes create funny situations.
Hello, everyone. And honestly, I think this is one of my favorite topics because mistakes are not only normal in language learning, but sometimes they are also very entertaining.
That is very true, because almost every English learner has experienced a moment where they said something confidently and then suddenly realized that it meant something completely different.
Yes, that moment when your brain says, "Great job," but the dictionary says, "Absolutely not."
Exactly. And those moments can feel embarrassing at first, but later they become funny stories that we tell our friends.
I remember one time a student wanted to say, "I am very excited," but instead he said, "I am very exhausted," and everyone in the room looked confused because he looked extremely energetic.
That is a classic mistake, because excited and exhausted sound a little similar, but have completely different meanings.
Yes, one means you have a lot of energy, and the other means you have absolutely no energy.
So the poor student accidentally told everyone he was extremely tired while jumping around happily.
That was a very confusing personality moment.
Another common speaking mistake happens with the words fun and funny.
Oh yes, that mistake creates some very interesting sentences.
I once heard someone say, "My teacher is very fun," when they actually meant, "My teacher is very funny."
Which sounds like the teacher is an amusement park.
Yes, like a human roller coaster.
Welcome to Professor Funland. Please keep your hands inside the classroom at all times.
That would be a very exciting class.
Another famous mistake happens when learners confuse borrow and lend.
Yes, someone might say, "Can you borrow me your pen?" when they actually mean, "Can you lend me your pen?"
And technically, that sentence means the opposite.
Which means the other person might say, "Wait, you want me to borrow my own pen?"
That becomes a very philosophical pen conversation.
The pen is probably thinking, "Why am I involved in this discussion?"
Poor pen.
But mistakes like these are actually a good sign, because they show that you are trying to communicate in English.
Exactly. And every fluent speaker has made thousands of mistakes while learning.
Probably millions if we include childhood.
That is very possible.
Brian, do you remember any funny mistakes you made while learning a language?
Oh yes. One time I tried to say I am full after eating a big meal, but I accidentally said I am pregnant.
No.
Yes, the entire table became very quiet for about 3 seconds.
That must have been a very confusing moment.
I quickly corrected myself, but everyone was already laughing.
That is definitely a memorable language moment.
The good thing is that mistakes like that help you remember the correct sentence forever.
Yes, your brain will never forget that lesson again.
So for everyone listening today, remember that speaking mistakes are completely normal and even helpful in the learning process.
The important thing is to keep speaking, keep practicing, and most importantly, keep laughing at those funny moments.
Because sometimes the best language lessons come from the most embarrassing sentences.
So next, we will share even more funny speaking mistakes and explain how to avoid them.
And some of those mistakes are so funny that you might laugh while learning them.
So, Brian, we talked about some common speaking mistakes, and I think one of the most interesting ones happens when people read a word in English and pronounce it the way it looks, which sometimes creates very surprising results.
Yes, English spelling can be a little tricky, and sometimes learners read a word exactly as it is written, which sounds logical, but English pronunciation does not always follow logic.
Exactly. And I remember a student once reading the word vegetable very slowly and carefully as ve-je-ta-bol.
That is actually very understandable.
Yes, because the spelling suggests that pronunciation, but in natural speech, people usually say vegetable.
I once heard someone read comfortable as comfortable, and they said every syllable very clearly.
That happens a lot, but most native speakers pronounce it more like comfortable.
English really likes to hide letters when speaking.
Yes, sometimes letters appear in writing but disappear when we talk.
Actually, this reminds me of something funny that happened last week.
What happened?
A friend of mine was reading a restaurant menu in English, and he saw the word salmon, and he confidently read it as salmon.
Ah, the silent L.
Yes, and the waiter gently said, "Oh, you mean the salmon?"
That is a very common reading mistake because the L is written but not pronounced.
English learners often expect every letter to make a sound, but English does not always work that way.
Another funny situation happens when someone reads numbers or dates too literally.
What do you mean?
For example, someone might read the year 1998 as 1998 in a casual conversation.
Right, but most people would simply say 1998.
It is not wrong, but it sounds a little formal or unusual in everyday speech.
I think many speaking mistakes happen because learners are translating directly from their first language.
Yes, that happens a lot.
I once heard someone say, "I very like this movie."
That structure exists in some languages, but in English we would say, "I really like this movie," or simply, "I like this movie a lot."
Small changes like that can make a sentence sound much more natural.
And sometimes mistakes happen when reading words that look similar.
Like which ones?
For example, desert and dessert.
Ah, yes, the famous extra S.
One student once read a sentence and said, "My favorite dessert is chocolate desert."
That sounds like a very dry dessert.
Yes, probably a lot of sand with chocolate on top.
These mistakes are actually very helpful because they show us which words we need to practice more.
And the good thing is that when you notice these mistakes, your brain learns very quickly.
That is why reading out loud is such a useful practice for English learners.
Yes, when you read out loud, you train your mouth, ears, and brain at the same time.
And sometimes you also discover words that you thought you knew but were actually pronouncing differently.
I think that happens to everyone at some point.
Yes, you confidently say a word for years, and then one day someone gently says, "Actually, that word is pronounced a little differently."
That moment can feel slightly embarrassing.
But it is also a normal part of learning any language.
So if you ever misread a word or pronounce something incorrectly, do not worry too much about it.
Just correct it, remember it, and continue speaking.
So let's talk about some pronunciation mistakes that happen during fast conversations and how learners can fix them step by step.
And we might share a few more real-life situations where small mistakes created some very confusing conversations.
Brian, something I notice very often with English learners is that speaking mistakes usually happen not because they do not know the words, but because real conversations move quickly and the brain has to think and speak at the same time.
Yes, that happens a lot. Because when people practice alone, they have time to think carefully. But in a real conversation, someone asks a question, and suddenly your brain has only 2 seconds to respond.
Exactly. And in that moment, people sometimes mix words together or say the sentence in the wrong order.
I once heard someone say, "Yesterday I go to shopping," and then they paused and said, "Wait, that sounded wrong."
That is a very normal mistake because the speaker already knew the correct grammar, but their brain was moving too fast.
The correct sentence would be, "Yesterday I went shopping," but during fast speech, the brain sometimes chooses the easier structure.
I think the interesting part is that many learners actually recognize their mistake immediately after they say it.
Yes, they say the sentence, pause for a second, and then correct themselves.
Something like, "Yesterday sorry, I went to the store."
And that is actually a good sign, because it means the learner already understands the rule.
Another mistake that appears often in conversations is adding extra words that are not necessary.
Do you have an example?
Yes, for example, someone might say, "I discussed about the problem with my friend."
Right, but the word discuss already includes the idea of about.
So the natural sentence would simply be, "I discussed the problem with my friend."
English has many verbs like that, where adding an extra word sounds slightly unnatural.
Sometimes learners add the extra word because it feels safer.
Like the brain saying, "Let me add one more word just in case."
Exactly.
Another common mistake appears when people translate expressions directly from their own language.
Yes, that happens a lot with everyday phrases.
For instance, someone once told me, "Open the light."
Ah, yes, that expression exists in some languages.
But in English, we normally say, "Turn on the light."
It is a small difference, but it shows how language structures can be different.
I remember another similar moment when someone said, "I closed the TV."
That sounds like the TV has a lid.
Exactly, but they meant I turned off the TV.
These are great examples of how direct translation can sometimes create unusual sentences.
One more interesting mistake appears when learners try to pronounce every word very carefully, which can actually make the sentence sound less natural.
Yes, especially with small words like to, for, and of.
For example, someone might say very slowly, I want to go to the store for buying of food.
In natural speech, those small words usually become softer and faster.
So the sentence would sound more like, I want to go to the store to buy some food.
Listening to natural conversations helps learners notice these small pronunciation patterns.
And repeating sentences out loud is a great way to practice them.
The important thing is not to worry too much about mistakes during conversation.
Because communication is the main goal, and small mistakes rarely stop people from understanding you.
Most listeners focus on the message, not the grammar.
Unless the sentence accidentally changes the meaning completely.
Like what?
One time someone wanted to say, I am bored, but they said, I am boring.
That changes the meaning a lot.
Yes, because I am bored means you feel uninterested, but I am boring means you make other people feel uninterested.
That is a small but powerful difference.
Let's share a few more examples of speaking mistakes that can change meanings and how learners can avoid them in everyday conversations.
Brian, another interesting speaking mistake that I hear quite often happens when learners use the words say, tell, speak, and talk, because these words seem similar, but they are used in slightly different ways.
Yes, that confusion is very common, because in many languages, one word can represent all of those ideas, but in English, we separate them.
For example, someone might say, he said me the news yesterday, which sounds understandable, but not quite natural.
The natural sentence would be, he told me the news yesterday, because we usually use tell when there is a person receiving the information.
Exactly. And with say, we normally focus on the words themselves rather than the person listening.
So someone might say, she said something interesting in the meeting.
Small differences like that can make a sentence sound much more natural.
Another mistake I hear sometimes is when learners mix up do and make.
Yes, that one appears very often in daily conversation.
For instance, someone might say, I did a mistake in my homework.
In English, we would say, I made a mistake.
But we say do homework, which is why learners sometimes get confused.
English likes to test our memory with these combinations.
It really does.
Something else that happens during conversations is when learners accidentally choose a word that sounds similar to another word.
Do you mean words like lose and loose?
Yes, exactly.
I once heard someone say, I don't want to loose this opportunity.
In that sentence, the correct word would be lose, which means not to keep something.
Meanwhile, loose usually describes something that is not tight, like loose clothing.
Small spelling or pronunciation differences can completely change the meaning.
Another interesting mistake appears when learners try to use very advanced vocabulary but accidentally choose the wrong word.
That sounds like an ambitious mistake.
Yes, someone once wanted to say, I am very confident about this decision, but instead they said, I am very confidential about this decision.
That changes the meaning quite a lot.
Because confidential means something secret.
So the sentence sounded like they were protecting classified information.
Exactly, as if the decision was a government secret.
These examples show that learning vocabulary is not only about memorizing words, but also about understanding how they are used in real situations.
Context is very important.
Another thing that can help learners avoid mistakes is listening carefully to natural conversations.
Yes, podcasts, movies, and everyday dialogue can help people notice how sentences are actually spoken.
Sometimes textbooks show correct grammar, but real conversations reveal the rhythm and structure of natural speech.
And repeating phrases that you hear can train your brain to remember those patterns.
Over time, those patterns start to feel natural instead of confusing.
And eventually, you might even notice mistakes in your own sentences before anyone else does.
That is when you know your English is improving.
Learning a language is really a long process of noticing small details, correcting mistakes, and continuing to practice.
And the good news is that every mistake is also a step toward improvement.
So we're going to talk about a few more mistakes that can completely change the meaning of a sentence and sometimes create very funny misunderstandings.
Brian, we talked about many speaking mistakes already, but I think some of the funniest ones happen when a small grammar mistake changes the meaning of a sentence completely.
Yes, and sometimes the speaker does not even realize what they just said until everyone else starts reacting.
Exactly. And I remember one situation where someone wanted to say, I am a little hungry, but instead they confidently said, I am a very hungry person.
That sounds like hunger is their full-time identity.
Yes, like their personality is just eating food all day.
Hello, my name is Alex, and my main hobby is being hungry.
That is a very honest introduction.
Another funny mistake happens with the words excited and exciting.
Oh, yes, that one can be dangerous.
A student once wanted to compliment his teacher and said very seriously, "Teacher, you are very excited."
That sounds like the teacher drank 10 cups of coffee,
Exactly, but he meant to say, "You are very exciting."
which still sounds a little dramatic. The teacher probably thought,
Wow, my class is really energetic today.
at least it was a positive mistake. Yes, some mistakes are accidentally compliments. I think pronunciation mistakes can also create funny situations.
Definitely.
One learner tried to say sheet of paper, but the pronunciation was slightly different.
Yes, that famous pronunciation problem.
Suddenly, the sentence sounded very inappropriate.
And everyone in the room became very quiet for a few seconds.
The teacher quickly said, let's focus on pronunciation.
That word needs very careful pronunciation.
Very careful. Another funny mistake happens with the words kitchen and chicken. Yes, those two words can confuse many learners.
Someone once said, "I am going to the chicken to cook dinner."
That sounds like the chicken is the location.
The chicken is probably very surprised.
Excuse me, why are you cooking inside me?
That poor chicken did not expect that.
It shows how one small sound can change everything.
These funny mistakes might feel embarrassing in the moment, but they actually help learners remember the correct sentence very clearly.
Yes, your brain remembers emotional moments, especially funny ones.
That is why many teachers say mistakes are one of the best teachers.
And if you can laugh at your mistakes, the learning process becomes much more enjoyable.
Plus, you get great stories to tell later.
Exactly. Language learning comes with free comedy sometimes.
So if you ever make a strange sentence or mispronounce a word, don't worry too much about it.
Just correct it, learn from it, and keep speaking.
Because every conversation is another step toward becoming more confident in English.
And sometimes those mistakes create the funniest moments in the entire conversation.
Brian, after all these conversations about common speaking mistakes, I think one important message for English learners is that mistakes are not something to fear, because they are actually part of the learning process.
Yes, that is very true. Because every person who speaks English fluently today made many mistakes when they were learning.
Exactly. And the difference between someone who improves quickly and someone who feels stuck is usually very simple.
What is that difference?
The person who improves continues speaking even after making mistakes, while the other person becomes afraid to speak.
That makes a lot of sense, because language is a skill that grows through practice.
Think about it like learning to ride a bicycle.
Yes, nobody rides perfectly the first time.
Most people fall a few times.
Sometimes, many times.
Exactly, but each attempt makes you a little better.
Speaking English works in a very similar way.
At the beginning, you might translate in your head, pause often, or mix words together.
But after many conversations, your brain starts producing sentences more naturally.
Another helpful habit is listening carefully to how native speakers talk in everyday situations.
Yes, movies, podcasts, interviews, and even casual conversations can help learners understand natural sentence patterns.
When you hear those patterns many times, your brain slowly becomes familiar with them.
And then when you speak, those patterns appear automatically.
Almost like your brain has a small English assistant inside it.
A tiny language coach living in your head.
Exactly.
Another good strategy is to notice your own mistakes without feeling embarrassed about them.
Yes, because every mistake is simply information that helps you improve.
Sometimes learners remember their mistakes very clearly because they created a funny or awkward situation.
Like when someone accidentally says something completely different from what they meant.
Those moments stay in your memory forever.
But they also help you remember the correct expression.
And eventually, those mistakes become funny stories instead of embarrassing memories.
So to everyone listening today, please remember that speaking mistakes are normal and even useful.
The important thing is to keep practicing, keep speaking, and keep learning from every conversation.
English becomes easier step by step, and every small improvement builds your confidence.
Thank you so much for spending time with us and practicing English through this conversation.
We hope these examples helped you recognize common speaking mistakes and feel more comfortable when speaking English.
Keep learning, keep practicing, and most importantly, keep speaking.
Smiling warmly. We will see you in the next episode of the Smart English Podcast.
Friendly goodbye, everyone.
Bright and cheerful. Take care and keep improving your English every day.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more English learning videos. See you in the next episode.